Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a book unhaul. I count my books in June and therefore I thought it was time to cull. I've been holding a lot of books. If my bookshelves are not in flux, I'm not entirely happy, so it's time to get rid of some books that I just don't feel excited to read anymore, and also some books that I read and did not like. I think I've got about 30 books here, but the title will say, but either which way, let's get right down to the books. So the first two books I'm going to be unhauling are It Ends With Us and Slammed by Colleen Hoover. I actually picked up both of these from somebody else's unhaul, and while I haven't read Slammed, I have read It Ends With Us. And I did not like it whatsoever. I think it just did not do its themes as well as it possibly could have. I thought there was no romantic tension. This is not a romance, but it does need to sell you onto some people feeling romantic feelings. And it was not personality based, it was just this guy is hot and therefore I fall in love with him, which was absolutely ridiculous to me, and I didn't like some of the tropes that it uses when discussing a very sensitive topic. And I've got more of this about it in the month where I wrapped it up, but unfortunately this just wasn't a hit for me. I wanted to know what the hype around this TikTok book was, but it just fell flat. I'm glad that I gave it a try, but also immediately after reading this one I read another book, which was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, which deals with the same subject matter and handles it way better in my opinion. And while this was a 2-star read for me, The Great Alone was a 5-star read for me, so I don't need to keep a book that I did not enjoy. I also decided this is going to be my first and last Colleen Hoover book I read, and therefore I've got Slammed on my TBR shelf, but I didn't want to read it anymore, so I'm just getting rid of both of these books. So the next three I'm unhauling all together, and it's just about time that they went, and those are Clockwork Prince, Clockwork Princess, and Lady Midnight, all by Cassandra Clare. These are Shadowhunter books. The first two are from the Infernal Devices series, and then this is the Dark Artifices series. And I've been gradually and steadily unhauling all of my Shadowhunter books, except for, you know, the Mortal Instruments, which is a childhood read for me and will always be staying on my shelves for nostalgia's sake. My Shadowhunter ship has sailed, as I always say, but I was holding on to these last three because I was wondering if I should just finish reading Clockwork Prince, which I actually started years ago in my first year of uni, to just finish it and be sure that I really want to give up on the Shadowhunter books. But I was looking through my TBR, and these are some of the older books on my TBR, and I just thought, you know what? I'm never really going to do it. I don't really want to read them. So I'm actually proud to say, as someone who does not DNF often, that I'm DNFing The Clockwork Prince after having it on pause for like 6 or 7 years, and taking it off my shelf. Also taking off the sequel because I'm never going to get there, even though everybody says the ending has them kicking and screaming. I don't care, I'm not going to get to that point. I don't even like Will, so I don't know why I was still reading the series. He annoys me to no end. And then I'm not even going to try the Dark Artifices series. I didn't actually like the way that this series started in the final book of the Shadowhunter Mortal Instruments series. It really bothered me that she introduced us to these characters and threw in chapters with them when I didn't care about them, which means that I'm already inclined to dislike them if I ever was going to get to this book, and maybe she would have been able to change my mind, but I guess we will never know. I'm also unhauling Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I used to have this concept of 3 strikes and you're out for an author, so I'd give them 3 chances, and then if I didn't like their book I would not read any more books by them. But now I realise that 3 strikes and you're out is just too many. It's giving authors too many chances when there are too many authors that I want to read and too many books that I want to get to. So this was going to be John Green's 3rd strike, but I'm not even going to go there. I know people say it has very good OCD representation, I know people say it's his best contemporary, but I read the first page and I was just reminded of how much I don't like John Green's contemporary writing style. It's just not for me. I find it way more pretentious than all of the pretentious dark academia books out there. I think this is the king of pretentious writing. That said, I don't think I'm not going to try another John Green book. I am interested in trying the Anthropocene Reviewed, which is his non-fiction book, and I might give that a try on audiobook rather than going for a physical copy. But yeah, time to let this one go because I'm just not going to read it. In a similar vein, The Flame in the Mist by Renee, Ahdieh. So this is the first book in a fantasy series, and I really liked when I was a teenager The Wrath and the Dawn by this author. I read it and I loved it, and even though I read that first book in a duology, I never read the second book and I have no inclination to. I feel like it was a good standalone, even though it ended in a cliffhanger. Sometimes I'm weird like that. But I thought rather than finish that series, I'd try another fantasy series by her. And multiple times I put this on my TBR when I was making TBRs, and multiple times I said I was going to start it and I just never have. So it's about time that I get rid of it, because realistically I'm not going to get around to it. I am getting rid of the Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, which is one that I have read. I've worn down this copy, I've enjoyed reading it, I loved it, I thought it was a very, very good classic. I am unhauling it because, as I've said in previous videos, I buy very cheap, sometimes second-hand editions of classics that I want to try, and if I really enjoy it, I then buy myself a very fancy and beautiful edition that is gorgeous and looks nice in my collection. So now that I've read this one and loved it, I know that I want to get myself a nicer, beautiful edition, and I don't need to wait and keep this one until that point, so I'm just going to pass it on to my sister, who really wants to read this one as well, now that I've raved about it all over the place. Another one that's going to another one of my sisters is The Rosie Project. Now, people have been telling me to read this for quite a while. My mum liked it, both of my sisters liked it, and I've heard such good things. I've also heard some negative things about the autism representation in this one, but either which way, it just sounds like another Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, and I don't necessarily need another Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine in my life, because I loved that book so much that I don't need another one to be in the same realm as it. And I don't know, just I never feel pulled to pick it up. I just think I'm not interested. There are other books that I'd rather read than another one that's similar to something I've already read and loved. Even though sometimes you read something and love it and want to read more of that kind of book, this isn't giving me those kind of vibes. We have Remember Me by Sophie Kinsella. So at the start of the year, I decided I was going to read the oldest books on my TBR, and I've been so successful in actually following through and doing that, which has been wonderful. But then I got to this book as the next one that I needed to read, and I just thought, I actually don't want to read it. So I'm just going to unhaul it and get rid of it. And I think it's been a bit refreshing to go through the oldest books on my TBR, the 10 oldest ones, and see if I really do want to read them. And if I don't, then I just unhaul them before I even try them. And I'm glad to say I'm doing that with this. I don't think Sophie Kinsella is an author for me. If you know my reading taste, you'll probably agree. Speaking of oldest books on my TBR, I recently read Burn for Burn by Jenny Han and Siobhan Dowd as part of that, and I didn't like it at all. I thought it was really, really petty and really, really childish, and I couldn't get on with any of the characters, who were purposefully unlikable, but were just too unlikable for me to even care about their revenge story and them getting their way. So because I read this one and I didn't like it, I'm not going to keep it, of course. So now we're getting into quite a lot of the young adult, or like the books that I got when I was younger that I'm just not going to get around to. And we've got Demon Road by Derek Landy. So I know I've got a lot of friends who really like the Skullduggery series, and I'm still open to trying that one. Simone also liked that one, and it gets compared to Artemis Fowl all the time, so I will give Skullduggery a shot at some point, but I'm not going to read Demon Road. I just don't have any interest in it. I read the first I think I read the first 4 chapters in a little taste test to see if I want to unhaul it or not, and it just wasn't tickling my fancy, and it just doesn't really sound like the kind of book that I would enjoy. So passing it on to one of my Skullduggery loving friends who I know is going to appreciate having this a whole load more than me. We have Dorothy Must Die. This one was really popular back in my blogging days, and it does sound like a lot of fun. The concept sounds really, really cool, but I have a huge TBR of books that I own to read, and a huge TBR of wishlist books that I want to get someday, and I just know that this is never going to be the priority. And while it sounds interesting, I'm never really going to make time to put it first. So rather than just keep it around, I'm gonna let it go on to someone who could appreciate it for what it is. Similarly, The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher. This is kind of a true crime non-fiction book, and I don't think I knew that when I got it. I think when I got it, I thought it was a murder mystery because it sounds fictional. It sounds like a murder mystery book. And when I was looking through the oldest books on my TBR to see if there's anything I wanted to unhaul, I looked at the synopsis for this and then was like, oh, this is non-fiction, and my interest dropped because I don't have that much interest in true crime. So I think, yeah, it was just a case of getting this one without knowing too much about it. We have Antigoddess by Kendare Blake. Kendare Blake is a well-known like horror fiction writer, especially young adult horror, and I do want to read more horror and I do want to read more young adult horror, but I just don't think this is going to be the one for me. I really wanted to try something about this author, but over the years I've gotten less and less interested in this author's particular books, and I think my horror journey is just going to be somewhere else with different authors. So I've stolen Songbird by Danielle L. Jensen, and I actually got this one because it just sounded like a really fun fantasy read and I was planning to buddy read it, but the buddy read never really came together, so yeah, gonna let it go. I think I don't often get books specifically because I'm gonna buddy read them for someone, but it has been years now and it's just been sitting on my shelf and I know I'm not actually gonna pick it up by myself, so time for it to go. And then the other one we have is Behold the Dreamers by Mbue, and I read How Beautiful We Were by this author, which is this author's latest work, and this was their debut, and I really liked How Beautiful We Were for multiple reasons, and I do recommend it to people, but I didn't love it quite as much as I wanted to, so I think I'm not going to be reading another book by her because I give authors less chances these days. I just don't have the time, unfortunately, so I'm just going to pass this one on as I don't plan to read it. When I was looking through my shelves for things to unhaul, I had to be brutal this time, and I had to be honest and DNF series, so I'm getting rid of Ptolemy's Gate by Jonathan Strout, and I'm just going to DNF this trilogy here. So I often DNF series, even though I don't usually DNF individual books. I am the queen of not finishing series if I don't think one single installment in the series is worth my time. I will just stop reading. I haven't got time to continue series that look like they're not doing what I want them to serve me. So I read the first book and I love it, and I will always stand by the first book in this fantasy series and I will keep it on my shelf forever because I adore it with my whole heart. But then I read the second book, and rather than it focusing on two particular characters, it kind of opens up to a group of people, and I didn't care about these other characters that were being added to the group. I didn't love the story as much because of it, and therefore it was just like an okay middle of the road read. And I originally got this one from a charity shop when I saw it because I thought I would never continue the series by buying the third book full price, but if it's in a charity shop, so the money's going to charity and it's very cheap, I will get it and I'll finish the series. But now that I think about it, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to stop here. And so I need to be a bit more careful in charity shops. That's what this is telling me. And yeah, that's the lesson I'm taking from this. Be more careful in charity shops, and if you say you're not going to continue a series, just stick with it, because you're really not going to. So we're really getting to the charity shop finds. So we've got Gone by Michael Grant in Dutch, which is Verlaten, and I thought I was going to read some of my favourite books in Dutch, but I've got to be honest, I don't think I want to read this one in Dutch. In fact, I don't think I want to reread Gone anytime soon. And it's less reading it in Dutch and more so that I don't want to reread it anytime soon, because some of my friends have been reading the book and they're very disappointed in it. And while I think I'm still going to love it because of the nostalgia, I just know that I am not going to reread it anytime soon. And if I am, I'm going to reread it in English. So while I fully intend to still read Artemis Fowl in Dutch and the Twilight Saga in Dutch, not Gone in Dutch. That can just stay for a bit. Next we have a play, Little Murders, and I did read this one this year and I thought it was really, really good, and I had a good time with it. It had a great setting, it had a great characters, and the way that the characters reflected the theme. It was all very good, and it did follow through and commit to some murders, which was a very good time. It did have quite a bit of homophobia in it, and it was hard to tell if this was commentary or if it was the playwright's own opinions, and that made me a bit uncomfortable. So overall, even though I did enjoy it, the discomfort I felt at some of the themes kind of eked this out at a middle of the road read for me, and I don't think I'm going to reread it, so I don't need to keep it. We have The Shack by W.M. Paul Young, and this is a Christian book, and I was trying out some Christian fiction this year, and it took me by surprise in how much I really enjoyed the first third, and then the other two thirds, they weren't bad, but they kind of read like a sermon when I wanted more of a storytelling narrative if I was reading a book, because I hear a sermon in church every Sunday, don't necessarily want to read one in a book when I'm looking for a bit more of like entertainment. even if I'm looking for values within the entertainment. So while I was reading this one, I just thought my mum would really appreciate it, so I think it's going to go to my mum. We have The Call of the Wild and White Fang by Jack London. I read Call of the Wild in a single morning pretty much, and it just wasn't a book for me. I was trying to read it because it's one of my friend's favourite books, and I'm trying to read more of my friend's favourites to connect to them, but I just didn't connect with this story. And if I'd actually looked at the synopsis rather than getting it because a friend liked it, I would have known it's not my type of book at all. I don't really care for animal perspectives all that much. So yep, it's going. The other Christian fiction that I read when I was trying out Christian fiction was The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, and I read it and it was okay. I didn't love it. My favourite thing about it was the prologue, which is not really good when you're reading a book, but just the prologue to be your favourite part, and it was very metaphorical, and yeah, it just wasn't one for me. But I'm very glad that I read it because this was a Christian classic that I'd been interested in for a very long time, so it was just a matter of time until I read it, but now I have, and I don't need to keep it. Another charity shop find, we have Eye in the Sky by Philip K. Dick, and this one sounded a lot like Divergent to me, which is why I was interested in it, but I don't actually think I want to read it. I think I was just intrigued by that matchup, and I do have another Philip K. Dick book on my TBR shelves, so I will be reading something by him. If I like it, maybe I'll pick up more, but I won't be starting with this one. We have The City and the City by China Miviel, and I've tried reading this multiple times, okay? I've started and read like 2 pages, I never got further. And actually I got this one because we read the first 2 pages and studied them in a creative writing class, and while those first 2 pages are great, I actually don't think I have motivation to read the whole book. And so I'm passing it along, and I don't know if I'm going to read anything more by this author. I'm very sorry to people who love this author, but I just don't think this at least is the one for me. And if I ever see any more of his works and they sound interesting, I might get one, but I don't think so with The City and the City. We have Aftermath by Kelly Armstrong, and this one has been on my TBR shelves for a very long time. I have looked at it every time I've unhauled from my shelves, and it has survived this long. So a round of applause to this book for surviving for that long, but it's not going to survive any longer. It's just time for me to accept that I'm not going to read it, and if I've divvied about unhauling it for this long, then it really is time that it should go. I don't think it's going to be bad necessarily, I just don't think it's something I'm interested in reading anymore. We have Love Letters to the Dead by Ava Delaria, and I got this book because I read In Search of Us by this author and I absolutely loved it. I was younger then, I was closer to the age audience of that, which is teenagers, and I absolutely loved it and I thought it was fantastic, so I immediately rushed out to get another book by this author, and it's about writing love letters to dead people. And it's about grief, and the main character is processing her own grief, which literally sounds like everything I would want from a book. And yet, I have not picked it up for several years, and I don't think I'm really going to. And I think it might be the letters that is putting me off this one. I just can't be sure. Or I just think that I wouldn't like In Search of Us as much if I read it now. That's also another possibility. But yeah, I just haven't picked it up and I don't ever really feel pulled to. We have Paperweight by Meg Hansen, which I actually hauled in fairly recently from someone's unhaul, but I'm just going to unhaul it completely. It's one that I've wondered about reading for a very long time, and I just read the synopsis and I read reviews and it just wasn't adding up into something that I was going to prioritize. I really rely on other people's reviews for books that I'm interested in, and specifically reviews on Goodreads of friends who have a similar taste to me, or at least similar in what they look for and tend to enjoy in terms of theme and in terms of writing. And seeing that they didn't have stellar reviews of this one and they thought it was okay but forgettable means that likely I'm going to find it similar, and I don't want to have that experience while reading, so not keeping this one. And then the very last book of this unhaul is Dark Matter, a century of speculative fiction from the African diaspora, and this is edited by Sri R. Thomas. And this is an anthology that I got for my dissertation. When I was writing that in my final year, my dissertation was all about Afrofuturism, and it was about Afrofuturism for adults and Afrofuturism for young adults, and how the themes and content of Afrofuturism has changed to fit the struggles that second and third generation diaspora are going through rather than first generation. and it was a really interesting and fun dissertation to write. Apart from my laptop crashing, I had a grand old time and I got a first, and I'm very proud of that dissertation. And you can watch a video where I talk about Afrofuturism for young adults, and I do still love and read Afrofuturism. It's one of my favorite things, and actually this sounds so interesting and entirely up my alley, but as I've said in previous unhauls, I just don't do well with anthologies. I really don't. I don't really like books where they rope together a lot of content from multiple different authors. I just don't have a good time. I don't have a good time with books that are just like binds up of loads of things. I just don't like this format. So I'm going to continue reading my Afrofuturism authors, but I'm just going to read them in individual books or by one singular author rather than a bind up like this, and I'm passing it on to someone who's very interested in Afrofuturism. And there you have it. Those are all of the books that I'm unhauling. A lot that I didn't like, but also a lot that I just realised I'm not going to get around to, and I think it's good for those to be off of my shelves. And my number one takeaway from this haul is to be careful in charity shops, because while I do find a lot of good things, I think I'm a bit more frivolous or on the edge with getting TBR maybes because they're so cheap and I know the money is going to charity. But yes, let me know in the comment section down below what is the latest book you have unhauled or the latest book you read and didn't particularly enjoy. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be updated every time I post a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!